On today's episode of the FliteCast, schedule changes, yay, yet again, plus a little bit of catch-up, because it's been a few weeks, and haven't talked about a couple of trailers, or that big Rolling Stone piece from Mr. James Gunn himself, and Warner Brothers Discovery. Who's buying it, and just exactly how much is it going to cost? All that and more on today's episode of the FliteCast. Welcome to the FliteCast, the place where opinions aren't right or wrong, and where we can agree or disagree about movies, TV, and other assorted media because it's all subjective. My name is Ray. Thank you so much for joining me. Hello. It's been a little bit since I recorded an episode of the main show, if you will. I have been recording. We've been doing Flight Chat episodes. We've been doing the feedback here and there. Been trying to stay consistent with that, but there's been a lot of behind-the-scenes work and development and changes going on around here at the FliteCast that I have been working on, and so it's been a minute since I have recorded an episode of the main show. But again, been doing Flight Chat. I did talk about Tron Ares a couple of weeks ago when that came out. We finished Peacemaker Season 2, and I gave my thoughts on that. There has been stuff going on, but I have been a little, not out of the loop, if you will, but just preoccupied, busy with other things, some stuff behind the curtain, if you will, including a schedule change for everything that is happening here at the FliteCast. And that should be first order of business. And I can roll that right into the spiel to let everybody know and remind everyone, especially if you're a first-time listener, that you can find this show at theflightcast.com or wherever you get your podcast. Whatever you listen to your podcast on, you will find the FliteCast every Wednesday. Yes, that's right, Wednesday. We're changing things up because right now, with respect to schedules and with respect to everything else going on, it is best that this show come out in the middle of the week. That's right, a hump day haberdashery, if you will. Every Wednesday, you'll find the main show, the FliteCast, talking about various movies, TV, and other assorted media subjects, if you will. And then we're going to move Flight Chat to Saturdays. Now, why does this matter to you, longtime listeners? Because the deadline for Flight Chat emails is now going to be Friday, 12 a.m., right? Friday, 12 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, which I guess would be 12 p.m. And are we still in daylight? Yeah, we're still in daylight time, aren't we? We haven't changed time zones. We haven't done the whole spring forward, fall back thing yet, right? That's coming up, though. We're like a couple of weeks away from that. But all right, 11:59 p.m. on Friday, right? 11:59 p.m. on Friday, 12 a.m. on Saturday. That is your cutoff. That is your deadline, because at some point Saturday morning into the afternoon is when I am going to record Flight Chat and when I'm going to get through all of your emails and all of your feedback, and we're going to have a grand old time talking about movies, TV, and other sort of media so that that episode can get posted on Saturdays. So that's the new schedule primarily with respect to this. We got the main show, FliteCast, on Wednesdays and Flight Chat on Saturdays. Yes, I know I'm changing things up again, but again, this is all because of workflow. This is all because of time. This is all because work-life balance is important. Protect your peace, people. Absolutely protect your peace. And never apologize for having to protect your peace. I saw somebody post that on Threads the other day, and they are 100% true. If you are a content creator, or if you're somebody that does anything on YouTube or on your own website or wherever else, Instagram, TikTok, whatever it is, never apologize for having to protect your peace. If you have to step away from the absolute toxicity and mishigas that is social media, do so. Absolutely do so without shame, without any type of guilt whatsoever. You got to do what you got to do, especially these days. Seriously, protecting your peace is extremely important. And what better way to protect your peace than by getting the hell off of social media and disconnecting for a good while, because it will rot your brain. It's been rotting all of our brains. And I am definitely looking forward to being able to spending less time, if you will, on Threads and Instagram and Facebook, certainly. I'm not even really on Facebook actively like that. I mean, the Facebook page is there and all that, but yeah, I'm not on there actively myself because, man, there's just way too much toxicity and AI and fake shit fooling our parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles and even some of us with respect to the nonsense that's out there. But yeah, FliteCast.com. Wednesdays, the FliteCast main show, and Saturdays now, Flight Chat for the listener feedback. So that's the important schedule change. But here's something else important to note. Patreon.com/theflightcast. That's right. The exclusive home for all of the bonus episodes of Flight Review, Flight Box, Flight Report when I start reading comics again. But here's the deal, right? So when it comes to big stuff, new stuff that comes out, whether it's The Running Man in a couple of weeks, because I'm definitely going to watch that, or Predator Badlands, I will still do Flight Review episodes of those probably on the way home from the movie theater, and those will probably drop on Fridays, the day that I see the actual movie. But every other episode of Flight Review and Flight Box and Flight Report will now become exclusivo, if you will. Sorry to steal that from Dave the Film Junkie. Exclusive for the patrons. Yes, the very loyal patrons, the very loyal subscribers to patreon.com/theflightcast, which pretty soon is going to have a couple of tiers, if you will. There's the Flight Officer tier, of course, that gets you access to everything. There's the Flight Crew tier that gets you access to the episodes of Flight Speed and Friday Flight and whatnot, but all that's going to change here. Look for some changes. Look out for some changes, if you will, to patreon.com/theflightcast as far as tiers and whatnot are concerned, because we're adding more content. At least I'm adding more content. I keep saying we, like I have a support team with me. No, it's just me, myself, and I doing all this by my damn self. But thank you so much to those of you who are very loyal subscribers to patreon.com/theflightcast. And I hope that you're enjoying the bonus content, including a brand new show that I am revealing here in what will be the final week of October, the final week of spooky season, if you will. So I have in my hand right now a physical copy of a movie, and this particular movie is one that I pre-ordered some months ago, and it was recently shipped to me from overseas, because this is a film, or at least this version of this film, is one that you can only get overseas, or if you're lucky enough to find a retailer on eBay or somewhere in the secondary market that sells it in the United States, you can get it here. It is a 4K Steelbook, a glorious 4K Steelbook, and it is a film directed by none other than Mr. Robert Eggers, and it is about to become the first film of his that I will have ever watched. Yes, I'm beginning my journey into the films of Robert Eggers. Now, he's only made 4 films so far. He's working on a 5th right now, but he's only made 4 feature films that have been theatrically released. If you don't know them, they are as follows: The Witch, The Lighthouse, The Northman, and Nosferatu. Now, out of those movies, you can guess which 2 or maybe even 3 might be appropriate to watch for spooky season. One of those movies is in my hand right now. One of them. And it is up to you to guess exactly which movie it is of his that I'm going to watch and review tomorrow on Flight Review, exclusively on Patreon. That review is going to post tomorrow. One of these Robert Eggers films that I hold in my hand right now. In fact, I'm looking at it. Here's a bit of a hint. It's limited edition number 821 of 3000. If you're somebody out there that collects physical media like I do, you've already guessed exactly what this movie is. And actually, somebody guessed it correctly the other night on Vodka Stream. So if you want to go back and watch that particular episode, or if you were watching that night, then you may already know which movie this is. You may have already deduced it. I bet Phil or somebody already knows what movie this potentially is, but it's in my hand right now. I will be watching it, and I will be reviewing it for Flight Review on Patreon tomorrow. So stay tuned for that particular episode, and it will be the beginning of a special spooky season show that I will be binging for Halloween week, if you will. I'm starting it a bit early. I'm not waiting until Monday, because there's a decent amount of movies that I have to watch. This is the first one, but there are many others, well, a handful of others, if you will, in my physical media library that I need to watch for spooky season, and I will. And those exclusive episodes of that particular show will be posting on patreon.com/theflightcast between tomorrow, which is Thursday, October 23rd, and Halloween. And you know what? Maybe it'll be Flight Review. Maybe it'll have a different title. I don't know. Actually, I do know. But you'll find out if you are indeed a subscriber, a flight officer, at patreon.com/theflightcast. So stay tuned for that, loyal patrons. And thank you so much for your support. I cannot thank you enough, and hope that you've been enjoying the bonus content up to this point. And I hope that you enjoy this new spooky season show, and that I hopefully will have the intestinal fortitude to get through all of this. I probably will, more than likely. This particular film definitely seems like it's up my alley. I'm more than likely going to enjoy it. Otherwise, I wouldn't have pre-ordered it a couple of weeks ago, or a couple of months ago, actually. But stay tuned for that, if you will. I think that's everything for all the particulars. All right. Thank you so much for all of you that support patreon.com/theflightcast. All right, let's get into it. It's been a few weeks, so got to catch up on a few things. First, I want to talk about this James Gunn Rolling Stone interview. I know all of you have probably given your thoughts on social media and whatnot about this already, and I know that he just recently did a new round of reviews with YouTubers and whatnot. Yes, all aware of that, but I want to go back to this Rolling Stone piece because it's official information. And not that when he appears on video, he doesn't give official information there as well, but I feel like some actual interesting in-depth stuff. And it's not a long article. It's not like one of the longer pieces like some of the other James Gunn pieces that I've talked about and featured and broken down on this particular show, if you will. But there are some nuggets in here, including one thing that freaked a lot of people out, and I definitely have some thoughts to share on that one. But yeah, I want to dive into that first before we get into all the whole Warner Brothers sale stuff and everything and all the speculation with that, because there's some articles and whatnot that came out with that as well, and some other new stuff that I saw today with respect to that. But before diving into the Warner Brothers stuff, let's talk a little bit about this Rolling Stone James Gunn exclusive interview. James Gunn on Peacemaker Season 2's ending and the DCU's future, written by Brian Hyatt, photography by Devin Akhtar Yelkin. This was October 10th, so yeah, 2 weeks ago. Whatever, like I said, getting caught up. But here we go. It says, from creating the Guardians of the Galaxy franchise's mixtapes to making the obscure Iggy Pop Teddy Bears Nugget punk rocker one of the songs of the summer via Superman, DC Studios co-CEO James Gunn has an impeccable record when it comes to mixing music with superhero universes. Peacemaker's just concluded second season with its killer Foxy Shazam theme song, Oh Lord, and its finale performances by both Foxy and the long-haired rock band Nelson playing the very deep cut to Get Back to You was no exception. Gunn jumped on a Zoom with Rolling Stone to talk about the season's music and some broader DCU topics. Some spoilers ahead, which you all pretty much know about. And to see what Matthew Nelson had to say about his band's appearance, check out our new interview with him and Gunn. I'm not really a fan of Nelson, so I'm not going to read that one. I don't dislike Nelson. I'd never heard of them. Truthfully, I'd never heard of that band until the season finale of Peacemaker Season 2. But either way, let's dive into this. That's the first question they ask him. Why Nelson? Why this song? How did it happen? I like what he says here because he says, I picked the song first. As you know, when I'm putting together songs for Peacemaker, I'm working from a massive list. At this point, it's a couple thousand songs that I think are Peacemaker-like songs. When I write a scene, he says, that utilizes a piece of music, sometimes I'm sort of inspired by the music to write the scenes. But a lot of times I'm like, this is a good place for a piece of music. What should I listen to? And so I go through my list. For this moment, it just seemed the perfect moment for it. And I truly believe that Nelson album, he says, 2010's Lightning Strikes Twice, is a great album. I mean, nobody knows it, but the whole album is a pretty great example of melodic rock, and the song is fantastic. Yeah, the reason I really like this is because I relate to exactly what he's saying. Because you ever think of an idea, like if you're a writer or if you're somebody creative and whatnot, if you have any creative inclinations, you ever just listen to a piece of music and like get you into the mood for something, or like you think of a scene or something going on in your head, right? Like I remember years ago when Matt Reeves was first writing the script for the Batman, and he gets on Twitter and he shares that he was listening to Bernard Herrmann's score for Taxi Driver as inspiration on how to write the scenes. And that always stuck with me because Bernard Herrmann's score for Taxi Driver is immaculate. It's fantastic. I love it. It's outstanding. And what a great piece of inspiration to use to write a film like The Batman. And so I vibe with this. I understand where he's coming from in terms of picking the music first and having a list of songs that he's going to use with respect to, what he does creatively. So I identify with that process that he has, but I also like some of his other answers here because they're like, you're about to change the course of that song's life. And he says, yeah, for sure. Like with the Foxy Shazam song, it really is just an effing great song. Well, all right, it's all subjective. No worries there. He says, you had that one in your pocket already? And he's like, no, I mean, I knew the song, he says. It was one of my favorite Foxy Shazam songs, and I'm a really, truly an enormous fan of the band. But I listened to a lot of different songs to try to figure it out, he says. And I really didn't know what I was going to use. Was I going to use Wigwam's Do You Want to Taste It Again? Was I going to use something else? And it really had the effect that I thought it would, which is at first everybody was complaining about, oh, I like the old song better. I like the old intro better. And now as we go into the 8th episode, the most common comment I get on threads is, wow, I didn't like it as much at first, but now I like it even more. And it is such an emotional song. It really works in this scene as well. I'm with them on that. I wasn't really digging the Foxy Shazam song at the beginning of the season, but yeah, it totally grew on me to the point where like halfway through the season, I was totally like kind of mouthing along with the lyrics. So it is a good song, and it is an emotional song, and definitely a song that people can relate to in these times that we live in today in the world for sure. So I'm with them on that. They asked, was it always locked into your head that you would have them perform the song on the show? He says, no, but it was always locked in my head that I was going to use the song at the end of the show. In the same way that there was always this concept that, do you want to taste it has various different meanings, but it ends up being kind of about the blood in Harcourt's mouth at the end of episode 8. And this song would be about the gathering together of these damaged souls in Checkmate. So that was always the plan that I would use this song. But the idea to put Foxy Shazam on the show, he says, was a last minute addition. I became friends with Eric Nally, the singer of Foxy Shazam, and I was like, you know what? We're going to be shooting Nelson anyway. What if we had just a couple shots of them and the reveal of them at this concert? And really what it is all leading to is the reason the song is playing is because this was the song where Harcourt and Peacemaker fully came together, kind of as boyfriend-girlfriend at the end of the show. So it was all about synergy, right? And for all the people that, are still holding Gunn's feet to the fire for his whole, I had the most fun I've ever had shooting this final episode, this is what he's talking about. See, and this is where, when people talk about James Gunn being one note, this is where he subverts that expectation, right? You think he's one note, but let's be clear, there really wasn't anything one note about the season finale of Peacemaker. You know how I know that? Because it pissed off too many people, and it disappointed too many people, and it was underwhelming to too many people, myself included, subjectively speaking. But like I said, as underwhelming as that finale was for me, I still understood and accepted what it was, and I still think it's a good episode for what it does. It just was not what I, as a fan, was expecting. But now, I have been level set on what to expect from James Gunn, and this is a gear that he has. For all the people that think all he does is dick and fart jokes and lowest common denominator, no, he does some emotional shit. And, anybody that has watched the Guardians trilogy and seen his other work, even the Suicide Squad as well, and Superman, he can do emotional shit. He can reach that emotional range with his storytelling. But there are people that want to act like he can't do that. And you know what? It's all subjective, and they can feel that way if they like. But he's got range for his writing, and this most certainly showcased that in that regard. So it says, are you thinking about ways to use songs in cool ways in other upcoming DCU projects, or are you leaving that to the individual creators? Now, I like this answer. He says, it's a mix. There's sometimes some hackneyed use of music, and I really don't like it, he says. I really don't need to hear Ballroom Blitz in another movie for as long as I live. Love the band, but don't need to hear Ballroom Blitz in a movie ever again. Time out. What is Ballroom Blitz? Hang on. Let me listen to that real quick. Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. All right. It took me a minute, but as soon as it got to like the chorus, okay. This was in Suicide Squad. Not the Suicide Squad. Suicide Squad. Yes, okay. Oh, no. Is he taking a shot at that? No, he's not taking a shot at Suicide Squad. He didn't do that movie. That movie used needle drops for the sake of using needle drops, which is exactly what he's talking about not doing. Like, he pours more attention and, like, heart and soul and, like, actual, like, thought into his musical choices. Even though, like, that soundtrack, everybody loved that soundtrack. I dig the majority of that soundtrack. But, yeah, so Suicide Squad, Wayne's World, Daddy Daycare, The Sandlot, A Few Best Men, which is an Australian film. Bordello of Blood. Okay. That's a Tales from the Crypt movie, I think. The Edge of 17 and Trick or Treat, Scooby-Doo. It's also been used in a ton of shows, including Quantum Leap, Firefly Lane, 911, Lone Star, Dark Phoenix, The Blacklist, Life on Mars, American Dad, One Tree Hill. Okay, fair enough. I get it. So I understand where he's coming from. Ballroom Blitz has been used, like, a lot. Fair enough. And he says, so when something like that comes up, and it comes up pretty often in these different projects, and they're like, oh, James will like this because it's 70s music. I'm like, I don't like 70s music. That was what fit the Guardians. I mean, I do like 70s music. I like all music. Yeah, I get what he's saying. He doesn't want to use music for the sake of using it. And people do hit the easy button and tend to lazily think, oh, that's something James Gunn will totally want that in one of his movies. Yeah, I bet he's had people send him like suggestions like, hey, you could put this in the next DC film. You could put that in Superman and do this. People even said that, right? Three Doors Down, Kryptonite, and all the other choices that people wanted to hear in the Superman movie. And they're like, oh, this will be perfect. This is in his wheelhouse. Well, no, he's a creative, and he actually, put some time and care into what his musical choices are, and I respect that. He also says, I've become a sleaze metal guy because of Peacemaker, which is a journey that started before this, actually. But I'm really a punk rock guy. all day long I've been listening to my 2025 list, which is a lot of Canadian punk band Pup and Irish punk band Sprints, and then also a lot of other modern alternative, a lot of hip hop. Oh, all right, hip hop. Okay. Then there's this guy named Russell. That's an amazing hip hop artist. There's a lot of cool stuff out. All right. I like hearing that he likes hip hop. That's cool. I wonder what his hip hop choices are. So then they ask him about music with respect to the rest of the DCU, and they say, in the upcoming stuff, the Supergirl movie and the HBO Max show Lanterns, are you thinking that way about songs? Gunn says, there's songs in both of those things, but I don't give a shit if there's songs in something or not. For me, I use songs like, listen, Superman to me was a score movie. There's just the one song that is strangely probably the biggest sort of hit I've had out of a show that wasn't Wigwam. You know, maybe Come and Get Your Love from the first Guardians. But everybody knew Come Get Your Love. It was like a rediscovery of a song from a new perspective. And yeah, of course, the Superman song that he's talking about obviously is Punk Rocker by the Teddy Bears featuring Iggy Pop, which, yeah, that song has taken a brand new life of its own amazingly. And I love that song. I'd never heard it before, and I love that song from the end of the movie. But I love this part of his explanation because he says Superman to me was a score movie, and he's right. That was one of the things we said early on was like, okay, look, we know there's going to be needle drops in the Superman movie, but can you please make it mostly score? And he did. He understood that. And I feel like that's a difficult thing for a creative, especially he's talked before about how scary it was. When he was on Happy, Sad, Confused at the end of the press tour for Superman, he talked to Josh Horowitz about how scary it was to do a movie that didn't have quite as many needle drops because that's what he's used to. Like you just said, he's got a list of 1,000 songs that he chooses from for his work. So to go to score only with Superman and also to get John Murphy and David Fleming to do it the way that they did, where it wasn't just a hackneyed copy of John Williams' work. They actually took it and reformatted it, rearranged it, and gave it a new life and a new vibe so that it felt familiar while also being brand new compositions as well. I can respect that, and I can absolutely appreciate them doing that in that regard, because I didn't sit there going, oh, well, this is just Superman the movie from 1978 all over again. No, didn't feel like that, at least not to me. But for people who have that incredible nostalgia, especially the Pearl Clutchers, yeah, absolutely, they got that out of it in that regard. But I just appreciate the time and energy that he places into his musical choices in that regard. And so there's a few questions here with respect to Peacemaker. Because, regarding the vicious twist at the end of Peacemaker from what seemed to be a happy ending, first of all, what's wrong with you? Blunt question. He just said, listen, this journey's not done. Should people expect that thread to be enormous going forward? And he just says, yeah. He elaborates further on this on Threads because he actually, and we've talked about this a little bit on Vodka Stream and in other places, because he actually has an incredulous reaction to people who just kind of glom or gloss over all of the big reveals that happened in that season finale. And we were talking about how a lot of us didn't really know what those reveals are. Like, people like me don't know what Salvation Run is. And, there are other references that people didn't quite get. Like, I vaguely knew what Checkmate was. Vaguely. I didn't realize, the history of it, but it was something that I had heard in relation to the DC universe. And it might have even been in another one of the live-action or animated adaptations that I've seen. I don't remember. But, yeah, he elaborates on that a lot further with the fans on social media. And then they ask him, since you said you're setting up the semi-sequel to Superman, Man of Tomorrow, should people expect John Cena's fate, Peacemaker's fate, to be addressed in that movie? He flat out says, no, but people should expect that the way the military and Rick Flag and everybody are working together, and they've created a probably illegal prison for metahumans on another dimension, is going to be a part of DCU's stories going forward. And it's not just a tertiary, oh, this is Arkham. It's part of the stories. There's an escalating war, obviously, that's going on between the government and metahumans, and this is a part of it. I could see that, because think about it. In the first Superman film, Lex Luthor had metahumans working for him. I mean, he had the clone, obviously, he had Ultraman, but he also had the engineer, right? And we've already seen a case where there are metahumans working for Argus. So this honestly seems like it's going to be similar, but maybe more aggressive than perhaps like the Sokovia Accord stuff that we got in Marvel, right? And not that he's doing a copy. He most certainly is not doing that. Because I don't think there's certainly not any Sokovia Accords. This is Argus and the government, doing some underhanded, shady shit and basically acting like judge, jury, and not executioner, or maybe in some cases executioner, but certainly imprisoner in this regard by, creating this extra prison, this multi-dimensional prison for metahumans that they deem to be deplorable, if you will, right? So this is definitely going to be a more aggressive situation. In fact, they asked him, so to be clear, you've made a key part of the DCU going forward about a government official abusing their power by having masked thugs come in from the middle of the night and expel innocent people from the planet. Gunn grinned and said, it's just totally fiction, Brian. This is like something that can never happen on our planet. But that's the beauty of things like comic books. You can explore things that would never, ever happen on our world. Yeah, can everybody hear the sarcasm there? Yeah, I think you're picking up what both of them are laying down in that regard. Yeah, we don't need to go there. Watch the news. Watch any of the legacy media that you may actually trust these, like, to some degree. Or don't trust any of them implicitly, if you will. But, go ahead and check it out, and you'll see exactly what we're talking about. It's the same type of conclusions, same type of connections people were making between the real world and Superman in that regard. The whole Jarin Purin Baravia stuff. Same deal, for sure. But here we go. Let's get to the piece that everybody was freaking out over. Not everybody, of course, not everybody, but a ton of fans, right? It's this question. They asked him this thread. Will we be seeing this in things like Lanterns and Supergirl? Or is this really your arc and not necessarily the larger story? Gunn's answer, no, both those things are worked in. We knew both of those stories were part of what we originally put together, so they're part of the overall tapestry. But they're also their own thing. Supergirl especially is a space adventure. It's like Guardians. Lanterns is its own... timeout. Let's repeat that last sentence really briefly before going on with the rest of this answer for full context. Supergirl especially is a space adventure. It's like Guardians. Lanterns, he says, is its own thing. There's just a longer, sort of bigger world we're building with all these different pieces, and they do all come together and intersect sometimes in a story fashion, and sometimes in a here's another piece of the world fashion. So this is where he's trying to keep it open. And that's really what this answer is about. He's trying to keep it open and trying to avoid the homework problem that everybody claims he's going to have. Not everybody, again, but a lot of people claim he's going to have the homework problem. And he can't avoid the homework problem. But of course, the homework problem itself is a purely fan-created problem. A purely fan-created stressor in that regard. Because the general audience doesn't give a shit about any homework problem. They'll watch whatever they want to watch, out of order, in order. They don't need to be completionists like the rest of us fans do. They just don't. And I know it breaks a lot of fans' brains, but that's just how the general audience operates in that regard. But he's trying to keep it open and not be so beholden to any type of a perceived homework problem from the fans. That was really the context of his full answer. And of course, the other question they ask him out of that is, are there other big arcs for this phase? And he says, yeah, Lanterns is really important in setting up things. So the full context of what he said here had to do with the big arc and the arcs and the storytelling motifs and whatnot and the direction that they're taking in the DCU. And all so many people could focus on was him saying that Supergirl was a space adventure like Guardians. And of course, that got twisted into, of course it's like Guardians because that's all James Gunn can do. But of course, if we go to the Google, right? I'm going to call it the Google for the purposes of being ridiculous, right? If we go to the Google and we search Supergirl movie, that's all I'm doing. I'm searching Supergirl movie. And the first result, Supergirl 2026 film. Let's see. Supergirl is an upcoming American superhero film based on the eponymous character from DC Comics. Directed by Craig Gillespie and written by Anna Nagura. It will be the second film. Wait a minute. Hold on. What does it say? Directed by Craig Gillespie and written by Anna Nagura. I pronounced that twice, like two different ways. But hang on. So not directed by James Gunn and not written by James Gunn. But people were freaking out because he said it's a space adventure like Guardians. But he didn't write it, and he's not directing it. Okay. Oh, and it, of course, still says, based on Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow by Tom King and Bill Quisevely, which I'm led to believe by those who have read it is a space adventure. Does take place off-world, if you will. So, yeah, all the people freaking out about One Note James Gunn affecting, Supergirl because, of course, it's all he can do. It's just Guardians. Yeah. Okay, shut up. Seriously, just move along. Like, all this caterwauling about Gunn and all this complaining for the sake of idiocy and nonsense, whatever. It's clearly not his film. It's clearly in his purview. I mean, he likes the script, but the direction that we see when we watch Supergirl next year in June of 2026 is not going to be the direction of James Gunn. It's not going to be the writing of James Gunn. It's going to be another director. It's going to be another writer. And quite honestly, that together with Lanterns and also Clayface, two other projects that are not written or directed by James Gunn at all, that's going to be the interesting next test for the DCU, is to see how the audience reacts and responds to content that James Gunn didn't write and direct himself. So, it is what it is. I mean, that's not subjective opinion, that is objective fact. James Gunn is not writing or directing any of the DCU projects next year, including Supergirl. So people who freaked out over that line, completely out of context, taken out of a larger answer for a completely different question, yeah, fools, as any one of us could have deduced. So then they asked him, people are wondering, by the way, if James Mangold's just announced deal means that the Swamp Thing movie he was planning for you is dead. And he says, no, it doesn't, no. What is James Mangold's announced deal, you ask? Well, I didn't know either, so I had to look it up. And as it turns out, 3 weeks ago, as reported by Deadline, James Mangold inked an overall deal with Paramount Pictures. How about that? Where he will develop, direct, and produce feature film projects for the Skydance-owned studio. The deal coming in the wake of the new Paramount announcing its first big project under studio co-chairs Josh Greenstein and Dana Goldberg on day one, that being Mangold's reteam with Timothée Chalamet, High Side. Paramount won that project in a highly competitive bidding war, it says. Greenstein and Goldberg said, James Mangold is one of those talented filmmakers working today, and we could not be more excited to welcome him to the Paramount family, starting with High Side and many more collaborations to come. Mangold said, I am very excited to begin this collaboration with David, Josh, and Dana, and everyone at Paramount. The enthusiasm they have demonstrated toward big screen films and the passion with which they have embraced my ideas for future projects is truly thrilling. So James Gunn says that this particular deal with James Mangold will not prevent him from eventually doing Swamp Thing. It does not mean that deal is dead. And they ask him, so you're hopeful on that still? And Gunn goes, yeah, totally, absolutely, yeah. We've talked to him. He's still invested, so we'll see. Some things take a long time. We'll see what happens. Now, when he says some things take a long time here, let me ask you guys a question. How many of you have already speculated that the reason that the Paramount deal with Mangold isn't going to kill anything with him making Swamp Thing is because Paramount's eventually going to buy Warner Brothers and be in charge of DC Studios as well? How many of you have already extrapolated that? I'm sure that's already been a talking point on Reddit, on social media. More than likely, I'm probably a couple of weeks late to the game. Whatever it is, what it is. But yeah, that's a possibility. But also, inking an overall deal with one studio doesn't mean that you can't work with others. It just doesn't, right? There's no exclusivity in that regard, at least not that I'm aware of. The DJ would probably have something to say about that if there was, unless the director agreed to it, and I don't think that he did. At least it doesn't sound like he did. These last two questions with respect to Gunn's interview just says, are you going to announce a new Checkmate show with the new team formed at the end of the season, or are we just left to wonder how this is going to carry forward? He says, we'll find out as time goes on. It's a mystery. Yes, of course. And then they say, poor Chris, poor Peacemaker. That planet he's on doesn't sound so uninhabited. There's something moaning in the background. I didn't think it was really moaning. It sounded like screaming. But he says, doesn't sound good, does it? There's a comic series called Salvation Run. So the story is very different, but that's where the concept is from. And so there's some of those elements are definitely a part of the future. And that's it for the James Gunn Rolling Stone piece that all of you probably read a couple of weeks ago, but I hadn't shared my thoughts on it. I just really wanted to get my thoughts out with respect to that and talk about how much more of his process that I really do appreciate and enjoy. I like that he's very transparent in terms of the stuff that he does as a creator, and to give my thoughts on, all the people that freaked out on the silly Supergirl line, which completely was taken out of context and had nothing to do with the actual question that he was answering from Rolling Stone in that regard. But yeah, some more goodies, some more information, if you will, with respect to the future of the DCU that we now wait for with bated breath, especially in the wake of what's potentially going to happen with Warner Brothers and DC Studios going forward. Which, of course, brings us to this next story posted at The Hollywood Reporter titled, Warner Brothers Discovery is for sale after all, as multiple parties circle. The board of directors is also considering other strategic alternatives to maximize shareholder value. Well, how about that? This was posted at The Hollywood Reporter yesterday, October 21st, by Tony Maglio. And it says, sounds like Warner Brothers Discovery is for sale after all. Amid swirling reports of bidding interest by Paramount Global, the WBD board of directors says it has initiated a review of strategic alternatives to maximize shareholder value. That's the first acknowledged of a metaphorical for sale sign hanging from the iconic WB Water Tower. In a press release on Tuesday morning, the Warner Bros. Discovery Board of Directors said it has received unsolicited interest from multiple parties, and it's listening. It says strategic options include continuing with the previously announced split and spin a la NBC Universal and Versant, a transaction for the entire company, or separate transactions for its Warner Brothers and or Discovery Global businesses. There is even the potential for an alternative separation structure that would enable a merger of Warner Brothers and spinoff of Discovery Global to our shareholders. Basically, it's all on the table, this piece says. Quote, we continue to make important strides to position our business to succeed in today's evolving media landscape by advancing our strategic initiatives, returning our studios to industry leadership, and scaling HBO Max globally, David Zaslav, president and CEO of Warner Bros. Discovery, said in a statement. We took the bold step, he says, of preparing to separate the company into two distinct leading media companies, Warner Bros. And Discovery Global, because we strongly believed this was the best path forward. It's no surprise that the significant value of our portfolio is receiving increased recognition by others in the market, Zaslav added. After receiving interest from multiple parties, we have initiated a comprehensive review of strategic alternatives to identify the best path forward to unlock the full value of our assets. It says earlier this month, Bloomberg reported that new Paramount owner David Ellison made a $20 per share bid for Warner Bros. Discovery, which was dismissed. It is currently unclear who is making these other unsolicited bids, although David Faber at CNBC mentioned on air Tuesday that Comcast and Netflix have made inquiries. THR has reached out for comment to both of those companies. Our decision to initiate this review, he says, underscores the board's commitment to considering all opportunities to determine the best value for our shareholders. That's from Samuel A. DiPiazza Jr., chair of the Warner Bros. Discovery Board of Directors. He says, we continue to believe that our planned separation to create two distinct leading media companies will create compelling value. That said, we determined taking these actions to broaden our scope is in the best interest of shareholders. There is no deadline for this review, the piece says. WBD is continuing to work toward its previously announced separation, which will keep its studios, HBO and HBO Max, in one bucket led by Zaslav, and boot its basic cable channels, the Turner channels and Discovery channels, and streamer Discovery Plus, to a new company led by current Warner Bros. Discovery Chief Financial Officer Gunnar Wiedenfels. Also on Tuesday morning, Warner Bros. Discovery announced a price hike for its HBO Max streaming service, so there's $1 extra per month subscriber in value for a buyer. Yeah, so there is that. But basically, guys, the crux of it is this. Remember a couple of years ago when David Zaslav, became the CEO of Warner Bros. Discovery, and it was speculated at the time that he was just going to do a spit shine polish of the company, get it looking shiny and new and whatnot, and then he was just going to spin it to another company, and at the time it was speculated that it was going to be Universal. Yeah, that's what's happening. That's actually what's happening. And we said that before when this first came up, this idea that Paramount and the Ellisons wanted to buy them. When I say the Ellisons, of course, I mean David, the current CEO of Skydance and Paramount Global, and also his father, Larry, who is the CEO of Oracle. They have definitely expressed interest, and as a family, Larry, at least, is worth enough that he would be able to buy, Warner Brothers by himself in that regard. But here's the deal. At the end of the day, and I know a number of people are, concerned about how this is going to go. First of all, there's the whole monopoly concern with respect to, this is bad for the industry to have another studio swallowed up. Well, I just want to make it clear, guys, for those of you that are so trepidatious about Paramount buying Warner Brothers, you do realize that a monopoly will happen the exact same way if Universal buys Warner Brothers. Because what have we heard, right? We've heard that Paramount wants them. We've heard that Universal wants them. We've heard that Netflix wants them. And that for some reason, people keep floating it out there that Apple wants them, even though I think Tim Cook recently stated, no, they have no interest in that. And quite honestly, Apple doesn't really need Warner Brothers Discovery at this point. They really don't, to be honest with you. Their ecosystem is totally different. It's just for the same reason that Amazon doesn't need them. Amazon and Apple don't really need libraries. They don't. Because one, they can draw people to their content in the first place because they keep hearing great things about The Morning Show and Slow Horses and other shows and movies and whatnot. And of course, The Boys and, other shows that are on Amazon in that regard, right? So it's not like they can't draw people to their content. But on top of that, content is not their bread and butter. Apple and Amazon care about tech and retail, right? They sell products. That's their bread and butter. That's where they make their billions. So to them, this is really more of a hobby. Honestly, for both Apple and Amazon, they use the content, they use the shows and the movies as a bridge to get people to buy their iPhones and to buy their their shop on their stuff on Amazon Prime and whatnot. That's what they look at it for. So why would they have an interest in Warner Brothers library? They don't need it. They don't need that at all. And if we're really being honest, neither does Netflix. Netflix has the largest streaming library to date, right? I don't care how much of it is shit in your opinion, subjectively speaking. And yeah, there's a decent amount of stuff on there that I wouldn't give the time of day. But I've said this years ago about how when everybody was treating Netflix and streaming like it was a fad, they spent that 5 to 10 years basically building up their own content, however shitty people may have thought it was, so they would have the biggest library and that people would be able to just watch whatever and just literally make Netflix their only app, right? And the licensing deals, they certainly had that as well. And then when those dried up and everybody else started getting their own apps and they took their content back because they were all trying to take aim and chase Netflix, and it didn't really work out. Now, did it? Even with the pandemic, it really didn't help HBO Max or Disney Plus or any of these other apps get closer to Netflix in terms of subscriber numbers. So then they started making deals back again with Netflix. And actually, a lot of that copyrighted content did return to the service. And they fluctuate and, contracts are extended and, expire at this point and whatnot. But Netflix really does not have a vested interest in needing the Warner Brothers lineup anyway, because they have their own extensive library and they have their own franchises, their own things that they can sell to the people, right? They don't really need DC Studios. They don't really need Batman and Superman. And they don't need to go to the expense to buy it. So, for business reasons, and this is the biggest thing, guys. This is the number one biggest thing to talk about with this is, and I know this is difficult for fans to do because it can be difficult for me to do. But when talking about what's logistically going to happen with respect to the sale of Warner Brothers Discovery, you got to leave your emotion at the door. Check your emotions at the door, because a lot of you are reacting emotionally to this, right? There's the political spectrum. You don't want Paramount and the Ellisons to buy Warner Brothers Discovery because they are in league with the current regime in the White House. I get that. You're concerned. You're worried about that because you think that if Paramount buys them, that all of a sudden we're going to see a scenario where the Ellisons either boot out James Gunn or make him change the content so that, well, now you've got to edit the whole Jarhan Poran Baravian stuff out of Superman. You can't do any more of that woke garbage. You think they're going to tell him that? You really believe that? And I think there are people out there in their heart of hearts, I think some of you actually believe that's what the Ellisons are going to do, if indeed they do buy Warner Brothers and get DC Studios, right? And then there was that whole thing I read somewhere, and I have to confirm this, but allegedly Michael DeLuca and Pam Abdi's contracts got extended and James Gunn's didn't. Well, James Gunn and Peter Safran just recently became in charge of their own division. Pam Abdi and Michael DeLuca have been in the business for a lot longer as producers than they have, right? Or at least than Gunn has in that regard. And the DCU is in its infancy, okay? They're not going to sign them to an extension until they start seeing bigger returns and more content getting pushed out there. Right? And after next year, after we see what Supergirl, Lanterns, and Clayface does, and after we see what Man of Tomorrow could potentially do, that's when you might start seeing talk of extensions for somebody like James Gunn or Peter Safran. I'm not sure what their contract lengths are. But I think for people that are so worried about the political aspect of a potential merger here, I think you need to remember something. And this is arguably the most important thing that you can remember when it comes to any of these studio heads whatsoever. And you should already know this based on the strikes last year, but I'm going to remind you anyway. The loyalty that every one of these studio owners ultimately have is not to the color red or the color blue or even the color white or the color black. It's to the color green. Green, the almighty dollar. That is what they care about, and that is it. David Zaslav wants the biggest bang for him and his shareholders, but not even his shareholders, for his buck. He wants the biggest payday that he can possibly get from selling Warner Brothers Discovery. That's what he wants. And whatever of these options that are all completely on the table nets him the biggest payday, that's the one that he's going to advise that they take. That's the one that he's going to try and get his shareholders to take. And make no mistake, politically speaking, if you're worried about somebody that is in league with the current White House changing DC Studios, why don't you do a Google search on David Zaslav and remind yourself where he's politically aligned? Something that we already have known for the last year or two. This is the guy that greenlit DC Studios. He created it, and he greenlit the DCU and gave its overwhelming support in the opening weekend for Superman. That guy, he doesn't care about woke complaints. He didn't care. He didn't say shit when Fox News called Superman super woke. He just cares about the money. And that's all that any of these studio heads care about, the money, right? So all of these worries and all these concerns and all this nervousness about, oh, the politics are going to get into it. No, the only politics is green. The only politics is, what's my bank account going to look like at the end of the day? The greed, guys, the greed is what you can count on in this scenario, okay? So if you're worried about it going south if Paramount gets it, no. I firmly believe, especially again, after hearing how David Ellison was waxing on about, that lamenting, if you will, the fact that Paramount didn't buy Marvel Studios in 2009 when they had the ability to. What happened when Disney bought Marvel Studios? Did they interfere with Kevin Feige's plan for the MCU? No, they did not. And I realize you're pissed off at Disney right now because they're not going to give us the Ben Solo movie. I couldn't care less, truthfully. I don't need a damn Ben Solo movie, and I think people are being depressed and upset over nothing, personally, in my own subjective opinion. But the fact of the matter is, when a bigger company takes over an existing entity and they have a plan, you want them to see it through or at least continue business as usual, because in this case, you're going to need content, right? If Paramount's whole idea is that they're going to chase Netflix and they're going to really try and be viable in that regard and add to their library of stuff that they've already got with Transformers and Star Trek and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and all that stuff, and Nickelodeon and all that, then you don't want them to alter course. You don't want to drastically change things. You want money. You want everybody's money. What have I said time and time again, and I continue to reiterate this? The good business people want everybody's money and do not cut any part of their audience off. They keep it as wide open as possible. Well, Ray, what about the redheads? Are redheads really going to see Superman anyway? Like, is that really what they do? They don't like Hollywood in the first place. They have 1,000 complaints about too many brown people in this movie or too many women in that movie, or what's going on here? Why can't we say that? They don't give a shit about Superman. They just want something to complain about. They're not going to ultimately give a shit about DC Studios. And at the end of the day, the Ellisons want bank. They want money. And that's what they will get if they leave DC Studios alone on its current plan, as long as it ascends, right? The only time that would be in danger, that would change, is if suddenly the viability of DC Studios and the DCU, if that changed, right? And I know there's plenty of think pieces. Well, did Superman actually make a profit? Did Superman actually lose money for the studio? Look, Zaslav gave it his rousing stamp of approval, and they're moving forward. It's not like Supergirl is getting scrapped. It's in post-production. We're going to see it in June, right? Clayface is currently filming. Lanterns is currently in production. No, they're seeing this plan through, at least through next year, right? Anything greenlit past that, we'll see. Depends on how the mergers go. But we don't know exactly which merger direction they're going to take. All we know is that it's going to happen within the next 6 months to a year. And it could be in any one of these directions that they're talking about in this article. But I really would pump the brakes on being so terrified at the idea of Paramount buying Warner Brothers and controlling DC Studios, because they want the money. They want the content. And I think that would be the same for any of these studios. But let's be clear, this is really a battle between Paramount and Universal. One of those two is going to end up with Warner Brothers. And again, rooting for Universal over Paramount doesn't fix things, okay? Because here's the deal. Here, let me present this scenario to you. For those of you, and Anthony, Brooklyn Batman in particular, I hope you're listening to this, because I commented on your post earlier on Threads about how you want Universal to, come on, do something, because you want them to outbid Paramount, because you, in particular, are worried about the politics of the situation. Well, let me throw this out at you. Suppose Universal is more dangerous to the idea of DC Studios changing and Gunn getting fired. How about that? And let me throw this out there, right? Never mind politics. What if we just go straight money? Like I said, because the almighty dollar is what these executives report to. This is what their allegiance is to, right? And in Paramount's case, what reason do they have to change anything thematically? Do they all of a sudden have better ideas for what DC Studios is going to do with Superman and Batman and the Justice Gang and all that? No, not necessarily. And they don't have anything else in terms of bigger plans for the IP. They just want DC Studios more than likely to continue on its trajectory. But Universal, on the other hand, has a theme park. And they have other avenues that they can use the DC branding for. And if they get a hold of it, then all of a sudden their people may very much have a say or want a say in exactly what the direction the DCU is going because, well, now we've got to market this for our theme parks. Now we've got to market this for our merchandising. Now we've got to do this. Now we've got to do that. Now all of a sudden, if Universal does buy Warner Brothers Discovery, if they do get a hold of DC Studios, now you can have other executives from Universal that absolutely want opinions. They want to force whatever type of agenda they've got merchandising wise into whatever DC Studios does. And now that becomes a threat. Now that becomes a situation where what if they give Safran and Gunn an ultimatum like, hey, you got to do this with Batman because we got to open our Gotham City theme park. And you might be thinking on the surface that's a great idea, but now you're infringing upon whatever it is they want to do. And what if it isn't the Pattinson merger that the merger bros really want, right? What do they look at that and go, oh, well, that's too dark. You're going to have to end that immediately. And now you piss off Matt Reeves and you push him out and you say, hey, see, you wouldn't want to be you. And then you create a Batman that's closer to like, you know, the Brave and the Bold cartoon series because they want kids to be able to go to the theme park. I'm giving you a hypothetical here. I'm not telling you that this is what definitively would happen, but I'm just warning you. You wish that Universal would buy Warner Brothers Discovery over Paramount, and it might be more dangerous with respect to the future of the DCU. If you truly believe in the creative freedom that you want James Gunn and Peter Safran to have for their franchise, if you really want to see their stories play out, you can't just look at it and go, well, this merger is better than that merger. No, none of these mergers are great for the art. They just aren't. Because the Big Five is going to turn into the Big Four regardless of which studio buys them. But you've really got to look at the nitty-gritty and ask yourself, again, check your emotion at the door. You're scared. You're worried. Political landscapes, especially if you live on social media or YouTube, are scaring you into submission. They are. They are. I know this because they've been scaring me and I've been recognizing this and I'm like, okay, no, I got to quit doom scrolling because this shit is really changing the way that I think in terms of how the world operates. And I cannot forget that at the end of the day, these executives want money. These executives are all about the dollar. And if they're smart, which most of them are to a degree or else they wouldn't be making billions, they will not shut out their audience. They will leave DC Studios alone and let them do what they do. But again, in the case of Universal, they may have other aspirations for what they want to do with the DC label. So don't act like Universal is the savior and Paramount is the devil, right? That's not the right way to take this whatsoever. The way that I'm taking this is I'm looking to see exactly what the landscape is going to be. At the very least, we know that the Big Five is turning into the Big Four. We know that another studio is getting gobbled up by another one. Just like Fox was gobbled up by Disney, Warner Brothers is about to be gobbled up by either Paramount or Universal. I'm writing off Netflix. I am writing off Apple. I'm writing off Amazon. Sorry, Snell Snyderverse to Netflix bros. No, that has always been delusional and that will continue to be delusional because even if Netflix made a deal for Warner Brothers Discovery and had that library, they ain't bringing the Snyderverse back. They're not doing that. For so many logical, rational reasons that are beyond the comprehension of a Snyder bro dumbass. Okay? We don't even need to go down that road. But yeah, this is between Paramount and Universal. And there are pros and cons potentially to either one of them buying this. The ultimate con is that the studio system shrinks and the competition gets more, like watered down because there's less of it and it's more of a, consolidation, if you will, right? More of a conglomerate in that regard. That's the big, negative, if you will, the big con with respect to all this. But it's going to happen. We live at a point where, the antitrust, stuff and all the deregulation is in effect. And these 1%ers and these studio executives, this is precisely the landscape that they want. They want the ability to be able to control all these facets, financially speaking, and have control of all these franchises. So it's either going to be the Ellisons and Paramount, or it's going to be Universal. One of those two. DC is going to end up in either one, right? And Warner Brothers will end up at either one. And that library is either going to join the ranks of Star Trek and Transformers and the Nickelodeon content, or it's going to join the ranks of Jurassic Park and Battlestar Galactica and all the other franchises and licenses that Universal owns, right? One way or the other. And I personally don't have a preference as to which studio merger I wish to happen because, again, there's, the operational focus of studio mergers, either way, shrinking the studio system. And I don't think that's inherently a good thing for the creative spot of it, right? So I'm not cheering one after the other. I'm not cheering for Paramount. I'm not cheering for Universal, right? One of them's going to get it. One of them's going to move this forward. One of them's going to happen. And it's a question on it. Honestly, it could be a scenario where both could happen, right? What if the split occurs? One of them buys Warner Brothers with studios and streamers, and the other one buys Discovery Global for CNN and TNT and all that stuff. That is also a possibility, right? Because, like the article said, none of these deals, none of these possibilities, none of these directions are off the table, right? There's a pathway for one of the studios to buy everything. There's a pathway for them to piecemeal it. There's a pathway for them to be separated and go about their own business in that regard. And if you don't believe me that the almighty dollar is what rules this over politics, right? And if you try to tell me that they're one and the same, well, no, not entirely. Because Paramount has had their last two offers for Warner Brothers Discovery rejected by David Zaslav, right? We know where David Zaslav leans politically. We know where the Ellisons lean politically. And yet, David Zaslav didn't just say, all right, go ahead, come on and take it. No, he rejected $20 per share. He rejected $24 per share, which I believe works out to be around $60 billion, if I'm not mistaken. No, he thinks those are too low. And I saw a post earlier today that suggested that the Ellisons, that Larry in particular, guiding his son David, that $25 a share might be too high to spend on Warner Brothers Discovery. Now look, the Ellisons can have, they have as much money as they can to ultimately pull this off, and maybe they will ultimately pull it off. Maybe Zaslav is just engineering a bidding war for the best price. But it's between these two in that regard. It's between Paramount and it's between Universal. One of them is going to get it, right? And we can make all sorts of fan theories and speculation. We can hope what's going to happen, right? Maybe some of you are listening to everything that I'm saying and you're just like, Ray, you don't know what you're talking about. It's horrible if it goes to Paramount. It's got to be Universal. And then you might eat your words if Universal does exactly what I suggested they might do if they were the ones to buy it, right? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe, the first thing that Paramount does is immediately order no more wokery with respect to the DCU. That would just make no sense whatsoever. There's business sense in Paramount buying Warner Brothers Discovery. There is sense in that because they want the library, they want the IP. Ellison wants a mulligan for not buying Marvel Studios in 2009. That makes sense from a business standpoint. If they really want the library and the content to chase Netflix, that totally makes sense from a business standpoint to buy Warner Bros. Discovery. It doesn't make sense to upset the apple cart with what they're doing right now in the here and now as far as the budding DC studios and the budding DCU. Just does not make any logical sense. I feel like any and everybody that is fearful that anything at DC Studios would change drastically, they're fearful out of emotion. And while I get it, and while it's not out of the realm of possibility entirely, it's just not logical. It just doesn't make any logical sense. And I know you can sit there and you can shoot down everything I'm saying and go, Ray, we don't live in a logical world. Crazy shit happens. Yeah, I know crazy shit happens. But guess what? If you want to sit there and lose your sanity over everything that could go wrong, that's your business. I'm trying to look at everything from a fair and rational perspective from the business end. And at the end of the day, the dollar rules all with these deals. Not who's in your corner, not which part of the White House or whoever in Washington is backing you. It's all about how much money can you make out of the deal. How much money is this going to make you down the road? That's what real, true, successful business owners do. If they do otherwise, and they cut out their nose to spite their face for stupid PR reasons, well, that's how you get Justice League. That's how you get what happened with DC Films. That's how you get how Warner Brothers ended up being several $1 billion in debt in the first place, which, by the way, whoever does acquire Warner Brothers Discovery, the report is that all the $1 billion in debt that they still have will be incurred by whoever buys them, whether it is Paramount or Universal. So that's something else to think about with respect to this. It's all complicated, guys. And I don't think we should be treating it with a scoreboard mentality. I don't think we should be rooting for one over the other. I think we're just observing what's happening in the industry and how seismically this is going to change everything across the board, right? Never mind DC Studios. That's certainly part of it. But look at how the entirety of Hollywood will change regardless of whichever studio gets this, right? How it will change the streaming era, how it will change the theatrical presentations, how it will change the content going forward. This is another turning point, just like Disney Fox was a turning point, just like AT&T Time Warner was a turning point as far as vertical integration goes, right? all of this is a turning point, and that's what we really should be focusing on instead of being scared shitless about which studio is going to buy DC Studios. I know that we're fans, I know that we get selfish, I know that we get locked into our own bullshit a lot of times. But think of the big picture. It's the same shit I said with Disney Fox. When people were just so singularly focused on the idea that Disney was finally going to bring the X-Men back to glory, you ignored all the other shit that came with it. And not that you're in a horrible position, not that, everything was so incredibly destroyed by that, but a lot of people did lose their jobs. And that's what happens. A lot more people will lose their jobs regardless of any merger, right? That's always a casualty. That's always something that happens. There's always a level of compassion that I exhibit with respect to this that I know fans don't exhibit because it doesn't happen to you. It's not direct. You just care about your movies. You just care about your superheroes, right? And yeah, that's callous of a lot of people. I'm not necessarily blaming or pointing the finger at any of you and calling you callous. I'm just saying, can we look at the big picture rather than worry so much about the small one? Because the small one is, oh no, what's going to happen to James Gunn and DC Studios? The bigger picture is, what does this do to the industry? That's the bigger picture that I think all of us rationally should be paying attention to. It doesn't mean ignore the DC stuff, but pay attention to the bigger picture first, I think. Those implications. So we'll see what happens. We know it's getting sold. We know Warner Brothers Discovery is getting sold. The question is how and to whom. We will find out within the next 4, 6, probably the next 8 to 12 months. Certainly within the next year at the furthest out in that regard. At the latest, we'll find out exactly where this is going and how all this is shaking out. And we'll certainly be on top of it, and we'll all be reacting to it, no doubt about it. All right, real quick before I sign off here, you know how New York Comic Con was a couple of weeks ago? Well, there was a pair of trailers that got dropped that I never talked about that I'm going to share my opinions on. Marvel related and Star Trek related. I'm actually going to start with the Marvel one first. That Wonder Man trailer. Not going to lie. First thing that I thought of when I saw that trailer was, is that Gurkos? Yes. Vasil Gurkos, the now deceased president of Bravia in the DCU. Yeah, that actor, what in hell? His name is Zlatko Buric. Hope I pronounced that properly. But I guess he's been obviously in the game for a long time. Croatian and Danish actor, best known for his performances in the Pusher film trilogy, which I've heard of but I've never seen. And the film's 2012. He was in 2012? Like the Roland Emmerich? 2012? Yes, apparently he was. Also, Triangle of Sadness. Look, Vasil Gurkos, president of Bravia, is the first thing I ever saw this guy in, right? In Superman. And now all of a sudden, he's playing the director, Van Kovac, who is directing the Wonder Man movie, the new Wonder Man movie in the TV show, the MCU TV show, Wonder Man, starring, of course, Yahya Abdul-Mateen II. And also, the return of Ben Kingsley as Trevor Slattery, which, yeah, I do think that's cool. Because the whole Trevor Slattery thing, right, for what it ended up being in Iron Man 3, and you know I'm a defender of Iron Man 3, that connecting thread with him as an actor that goes into, the retconning or the fixing, if you will, of the whole Ten Rings deal and the Mandarin, really, to be honest with you, in Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, that was a cool thread, a nice comedic turn there. And now to see him in here continuing to play Trevor Slattery, that is, Ben Kingsley is awesome anyway. So, that is cool to see the Trevor Slattery character continue. This show looks like it's going to be meta upon meta. And you know what? I'm here for it. It almost looks like it's MCU's version of the studio. And mind you, I haven't watched the studio. I'm just getting that vibe from this trailer is that's what this is going to be. The idea, what is the idea of making a movie in a universe like the MCU where superheroes and stuff are a real deal, right? And the director Kovac even says people are tired of superhero movies. They want something different. I'm paraphrasing, but that's, that paraphrases all the different, the parallels rather, all the different arguments that we have about superhero fatigue and people are tired of the genre and it's not doing this or whatever. So if the show goes in that direction and attacks stuff like that, cool. I'm not getting my hopes up or my expectations really high. I just think it looks different. And I am cool with the idea of it looking different, right? Uncharacteristic, not like other Marvel shows. I embrace difference. I give it a shot. I try to have an open mind with it, right? I don't look at it it needs to be explosions and it needs to be CGI and it must be action and I don't want to be bored to death. No, give me some good character development. Give me some good acting, right? Can you give me some humor that isn't just one-liners and quips? That might happen. That might happen in this particular show. We'll see. I don't know, but yeah, I didn't dislike the trailer. I thought it was intriguing, and I am curious about it. It premieres January 27th. Yeah, I'm curious. I'm sure I'll watch it. Definitely I'll watch it and see exactly like how it connects to the rest of the MCU proper. But yeah, I have no issues. I have no major complaints. But I'm also somebody that does not think the MCU is dead, like so many others are apparently saying at this point in time. Man, it's amazing how narratives can flip in the span of just a year or two. Wow. But yeah, that's my thoughts on Wonder Man. Now, when it comes to the new trailer for Starfleet Academy, which is also premiering in January as the new Paramount Plus Star Trek series, I think this sentence sums it up. If I could take the comment section on YouTube for this particular trailer and nuke it 1,000 times over, I would. Because if you go to the comment section, I don't recommend reading any YouTube comment section, to be honest with you, because it's largely trolls and sad sacks and pathetic wastes of space that just want to be negative and hate the world for whatever silly, selfish reason that they have. And this is no different, right? I mean, this trailer had 7.8 million views 11 days ago, as of the time of me looking at this, and there's nothing but negative, pearl clutching bullshit posted here, right? Like oh, but finally they made a Star Trek CW show, and some asshole called it Glee Trek. Look, here's the deal, old effers. Okay, I'm censoring myself. Please drink your Senka and go to sleep. Like, just go away. Okay, like it really bugs me, and I know I'm complaining about fandom here. Oh, what a surprise! Because usually it's not the franchises that piss me off. Usually it's the fandoms that piss me off. More than likely, more often than not, in that regard. Because fans suck. Fans are selfish. Fans are mean and rude and only care about what they want, not about what anybody else wants. Here's the deal, old fans, old pearl clutchers. No, this doesn't look like the Star Trek you grew up with, because it's not. It's not the original series. It's not TNG. It's not DS9. It's not Voyager. It's not Enterprise. It's not what you grew up with. It's not what I grew up with. It's something different. It's something aimed at a different target audience, right? The younger generation that actually enjoyed Discovery and probably also enjoyed Picard for whatever they could glean out of it because they never watched TNG in the first place. Maybe even younger people that enjoyed Star Trek Lower Decks, while you were busy complaining about Boimler and Mariner laying waste to the sanctity and the pride and the class that Star Trek had as a franchise. No, get the hell over yourself, you pathetic piss ants. Seriously. Like, I am so done with gatekeeping fans. The trailer looks intriguing to me because it's different, because it's new, because it's not TNG Redux, because it's not the same thing we've seen over and over again. I really don't understand why it's so difficult for fans to simply be open-minded to a different interpretation of their franchise that, by the way, is hundreds of years in the future from everything else, right? This is a sequel to Discovery. This is a spin-off of Discovery. Remember where Discovery ended up, season 3, 4, and 5? 900 years in the future, right? It's so far away from even the TNG era that what are we talking about here? This looks nothing like Star Trek. Fine, don't watch it. Don't watch it, asshole. Seriously. I mean, there are starships, and there's the insignia, and, there is a hybrid Klingon, Jem'Hadar, which really intrigues me. Gina Yasher's character. That's the character that I'm looking forward to the most, because I just love that idea. The idea of a hybrid Klingon Jem'Hadar. Like, that's something like, oh, hell yes. Of course, but I'm also the nut job, apparently, that liked the idea of the President Rillick, being a hybrid Cardassian Bajoran. Can you, how amazing, how incredible does that sound? Seriously. For me, it sounded incredible, right? Because after watching DS9 and seeing the abject hatred and what those two races went through in terms of the occupation and all the strife and all the pain and all the misery and all the suffering and all the wars and whatnot, and then to think that hundreds of years we would actually see that type of a blend, right? That type of emerging, that type of a melting pot with respect to the races. Yeah, I like that idea. And that idea is also quintessentially Star Trek. The idea that eventually the future wins out and aliens and whatnot can live together in peace. And I'm intrigued to see where the franchise goes from the end point of Discovery. I am. And I love the fact that Holly Hunter's involved. I love the fact that Paul Giamatti is a villain and he's involved. I love the fact that Robert Picardo, the doctor, is back. Seriously. What do I have to be upset about? unless I'm a pearl-clutching weird ass, which thankfully I'm not. Because, man, how insufferable would I have to be to watch that trailer and go, this is bullshit. The Gene Roddenberry is rolling over in his grave. Oh, just shut up, sit down, and just go sit in the corner and, go just massage all of your copies of TNG and leave the rest of us alone, right? If this is another case where Star Trek is able to bring in a new, younger audience, right? Gen Z, Gen Alpha, whoever it is. If this is how they bring in new Star Trek fans, so the hell be it. You don't have to watch it. That's fine. You don't have to watch all Star Trek. Just shut the hell up about it. Stop whining like a child. Well, Ray, what do you think you're doing? I'm calling dumbasses out is what I'm doing. You can call it whining, but the fact of the matter is, nothing about this trailer upsets me. Nothing about this trailer bothers me. Nothing about this trailer ruins my day. I'm intrigued by this trailer. I will watch this show because I live in a world where I like being happy and not a misanthropic piece of shit. So I enjoy it. And I as I look at my shelf of Star Trek, and I impatiently wait for other forms, the other shows, like DS9 and Voyager to ever get remastered for Blu-ray, not 4K, that's not going to happen, but Blu-ray, right? Can you give me Blu-ray copies of that, right? And then looking at all the other Blu-ray copies of Star Trek that I don't quite have yet, but will at some point, right? I enjoy the entirety of the franchise. Maybe I'm on an island that only enjoys, me. It's just me and two other people that enjoy the entirety of the franchise. Whatever. I like being happier than those people. It's just like with the Superman people. The ones who want to fight over which is better, whether it's Superman the movie from 1978, Man of Steel, or, James Gunn Superman in 2025. I own all three, so I'm the happiest. And I like this Starfleet Academy trailer, so I'm the happiest. After, enjoying Discovery, enjoying Strange New Worlds, even though I do still need to finish Season 3. I did not finish it. No, it had nothing to do with the show itself. It had to do with me being a procrastinating fool in that regard. But whatever. The trailer looked fine. I don't have any issues. I'm not a pearl clutcher. I want to see it. I'm going to watch it. It's Star Trek. Fans suck. Ugh. Just enough to give you a damn headache. All these pearl clutching morons. Oy vey. Seriously. When did it become a crime to be happy? When did it become wrong to be happy with some shit? Why we gotta just go and lean into the misery every single flippin' day of your existence? You gotta get on YouTube and you gotta spew your bile. You gotta spew your hatred. You gotta take this down. You've gotta let everybody else know how angry of a son of a bitch you are with respect to a new trailer that you don't even need to watch. No one's forcing you Clockwork Orange style to watch any of this shit. Oy vey. It's just ridiculous. And call it whining if you want. I don't give a shit. Anybody whining and complaining about this trailer is a far bigger crybaby and whiner than I could possibly be, truthfully. At least I'm commenting on other humans being dumbasses. You're commenting on a trailer pissing you off and ruining your life. Which one of us is more pathetic than the other? Just saying. Anyway, those are my thoughts in a nutshell on the Starfleet Academy trailer, or what I felt about it and how I feel about all the stupid-ass, closed-minded Star Trek fans that can go straight to hell for being misanthropic pieces of shit. It's all subjective, and those are my subjective opinions. Agree or disagree with them at your disposal. And that will conclude another episode of the FliteCast. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for supporting the FliteCast.com. Seriously, I hope that all of you have been enjoying the content. I hope that all of you enjoy the future content that is to come. If you have any thoughts or feelings with respect to any of what I talked about here, whether it's any of the WB stuff, any of the James Gunn stuff, any of your concerns about the mergers, or any of your thoughts on the trailers I talked about, whether it's Wonder Man or Starfleet Academy, or if you have any other thoughts with respect to movies, TV, and other assorted media that you wish to share in the feedback circle, with a new deadline of Friday, 11:59 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, you know where to find me on Threads and on Instagram at the FliteCast. I'm also on BLUESKY at FliteCast. You can also comment on the posting for this episode on the FliteCast YouTube channel. There's also the FliteCast Facebook page. And, of course, I can be reached by email at ray@theflightcast.com. All right, take care. Stay safe out there. Have a great rest of the week. And I will see you all next time. Take it easy.